Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Open Security Summit session with us. We are joined by Timo and Roberto tonight to talk about DevSecOps maturity model. This will be a very highly interactive session for all of the people that are here now. Please don't be shy. Unmute yourselves anytime and do contribute. If you're watching this from YouTube, I will be putting the GitHub repo link in the description so you can go and make contribution from there. And without further ado, over to you, Timo.
Yes, thank you. Roberto, are you there?
Yes, I am.
So in the session, we will talk about the model itself and how to enhance it. Some things are, for example, that there are activities missing, like web applications, firewalls, and where we would like to put it. Also, we can compare with other maturity models and see what we want to take from them and how to implement it into DSOMM. And the DevSecOps maturity model is on one side the intellectual property, how it is structured, and the content itself, and on the other hand the application. And Roberto, I think since 3 months already, is hardly working on the application and making it better. And you also have prepared some tasks or some questions, right? So would you like to start, or should I start?
Please, Timo, it's the floor is yours.
The floor is mine. Okay, so I will start. I think you will need in the end half an hour, right? So that we plan that you get your time, because otherwise you so that your preparation will be valued. Let me quickly set up my timer so that I won't talk for too long. So when is the session actually?
We do not have the time restriction from
no time restriction.
security summit side.
Okay, so I will just in an hour get the reminder, and then we can see what we would like to do. All right, so then I will share my screen now. I will share my screen, desktop 1. This is code for later, and yeah, So now I'm prepared. So we will have this workshop. One thing which you might have been to the introduction session beforehand. In case you haven't been there, you need a small introduction into the DevSecOps maturity model, a team-centric view. This is a meta maturity model from Patrick Debo. And he created this model and created a request for comments. In this model, it is structured as you can see here. I will zoom in. It got released, as you can see on the top right here, a few days back, so it's pretty new. New stuff we are talking here about. He said he developed this to assess your own DevSecOps maturity model, and one DevSecOps maturity model is obviously the OWASP DevSecOps maturity model. So we can use this model to check what we have in the OWASP DevSecOps maturity model. For sure, for that we need to understand both models in order to enhance both in the end. So he structured it as follows. He has a very simple dimensions. He says he has people and technology, and in people and technology he has 4 pillars. So on the people side we have security empowerment, so which is basically shift left. Then we have security governance, which is about processes, secure delivery, which is about secure development lifecycle and tech flow, and the secure stack. So how do we secure applications and services? What is interesting from my point of view, when you take a look into it in more detail, is the following. So let's take a look, for example, at security empowerment. What he has here, it's kind of a story which we have when we take a look at DSOMM, for example. which we don't have in that granularity. So here we have the different. This is somehow wrong. There is something wrong in here. Let's check this. We have here build, deployment, and patch management within the dimension build and deployment. So this is more granular, let's say, but there is not this overall introduction, what is build, deployment, patch management, and so on about. I will continue a little bit, and then we will come back to this point to discuss if we need a better description and how we would like to include it in case we want one. So he has a description here. The difference is that he has, let's say, a whole story in this collaboration thing. So he tells, it's more a story from my point of view. Let us go to authority. That is, I think, a very cool thing, because I like this idea of authority and how he highlights it. That is actually my own thinking, but I couldn't so far express it in this nice way as he did it. So we start with the initial foundation. In the initial foundation, security is dedicated and controlled centrally, or is not present at all. So that means in the end we have a central security team, and all people will say, yeah, security is responsible for security. And let us go here to measured advanced. The maturity of security issues can be decided by the team itself. The balance has flipped, and now security team only work on helping with expectations or quality assessment checks. And when we go now to optimization expert, you can see you build it, you run it, you secure it. So that is the basic statement, right? So now the team is fully responsible for everything. The team can take autonomous decisions while maintaining full transparency to the security team. So for me, that means they are doing, for example, threat modelings on their own, and they might invite the security team to be there, and they will make sure that the security team can access the threat model documentation, and can also access, for example, Jira tickets, which are linked in that room. I will let someone join us. And so that is basically what I understand from this. There is a lot of things to grab here. So that is one task that we think about, how to include this thinking in concrete activities. That is a very hard thing. Yeah, another thing which we see here is that in this model there are only activities. So I'm also a lecturer. So in lecture you differentiate. And basically, this model is also kind of to teach, right? So that's why it matches perfectly. When you present, when you make a training at a university, you think, do people need to understand how an attack happens, and do you include this in the same time as how to defend against it? So some professors say it's very important to understand the attack. And some professors say it's a waste of time, because when there is an SQL injection, you use an object-related mapper and that's it. You don't need to understand all the details around it. So what I would like to point out here is a question. When we now go to DSOMM again, and we take a look at concrete activity, it doesn't matter which one, I just pick a random one, we will see here that there is a risk described. And to create this risk is a workload. In the same time, I could create more activities, or other people could create more activities. So the first question I have to you is it worth it to have these risks in it? Or do you say we just focus on the opportunities and do not think so much about the risk itself? Do you have opinions about it?
I think we should keep them both, because your audience might be really different. It could be a developer, it could be a risk person like me who's looking at this, and it should be useful for both of them.
So when we take a look, let us my mostly used example is this of the text surface. That is what I have shown beforehand. So here we have, so this is a build and deploy. The build defined build process is a pre-requirement to do some other activities. This one here is actually more related to security. So we have a real threat here. Components, dependencies, files, or file access right might have vulnerabilities, but they are not needed. And the opportunity we are having is removal of not needed components, dependencies, file, or file access rights for container images. The use of distress images is recommended. So here we have the risk description and the opportunity, and you say it's worth it to have the risk in addition to the opportunity.
Yeah, but maybe some more risk people can work on the risk wordings to make them more risk people focused.
Yeah, this one is not so. Yeah, I understand what you mean.
And
it could be improved.
Yeah, Andre from the audience says, I prefer the process approach from a systems engineering background.
Okay. So with this process, you mean the opportunity, right?
Waiting for his response. Andre, do you mean the opportunity one? Oh, okay.
Well, on this part, for example, when I talk with my QA colleagues, they suggest to while retaining a more descriptive or more generic description of the risk, to use an array of small risks clearly identified by a taxonomy, because this could help, for example, joining stuff with the basis of a risk analysis. For example, I could have a risk analysis that is not related to a specific platform, but is an organizational risk analysis. And then I could decline it using DSOMM, but on other sector of the same company, this could be declined with other tools or other frameworks, because, for example, there is no software involved. And in this case, using a clearly defined taxonomy of risks could help. I have some examples in my slides, but I will show you that in after. I think that those are two different ways, but probably we could find a way to retain both.
And Andre has also responded. The advantage of having a full thought process allows a brainstorm against the trade-offs in terms of costs versus benefits. When we say not needed, it varies. Like the files aren't covered by the OS hardening. Okay, I butchered it up, but I don't know if you get the gist. Or Andre, you can unmute and try explaining as well.
Sorry guys, I am cooking here and I didn't want to bother you with all the noises I have behind me. So my thoughts on this is that if you have a brainstorm session with anyone involved for this particular topic, of course, that then we will define what is actually needed or not. But I was thinking that if you are already considering other items, like the OS hardening already being done, then this will already be covered and I would be okay with this not being needed. Because when I see something like not being needed, raises flags, and I think that it needs a bit more thought. Sorry.
Okay, you mean the description here for the specific activity?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, yeah. To talk about the specific action here, you're completely right. It should be the opposite. When I created this activity 4 years back, what I did is I looked into the containers and removed, for example, files with the set UID bit. So that was the approach for 5 years ago. Now you might use distress images, which is the opposite. So you create an image and then you copy into the runtime image, let's say, only the needed files. So it's the opposite. Yeah. So it could be framed better that that is a better better description here. So I will write down that I will enhance it afterwards, or even better, maybe someone of the audience can create a pull request. But in case that doesn't happen for some time, I will do it myself.
Well, while I agree on the consideration from Andre, I think that before focusing on single, we could focus on single issues and improving single issues, single activities. I think that once we have an improved data model where we can relate activities, it could be easier to identify the parts that are duplicates and the parts that instead can be useful to leave as they are. Because the risk is that if I deduplicate without being sure that some description, some opportunity or activity is not elsewhere, the risk is that I won't do that activity, or I don't get that opportunity.
Any thoughts?
Have I been confused enough?
I understood it because we talked about it beforehand, right? So, and for the risk itself, I would say that could work, but in the end, I think we have to try that out to see if it's worth it. Okay. Then I have my next question for you. It's also regarding this risk here. So here we have this fancy word opportunity. And for me, risk is something which is mostly rated somehow in relation to the company. So I'm thinking if threat would be a better wording here. As we say, we would like to keep the risk. The question is risk the right wording, or do you have other ideas like threat?
Potential issue, but they all end up being the risk. Well, you don't have likelihood of the impact, so yeah, you could call it something else if you wanted to. But that's like
I think that they are both good match. I can define a threat, I can define risks in the same activity, and make some join on the schema and check the results. I would try iteratively and getting if the output of the changes makes sense, instead of thinking just about which is the better theoretical model, which is important to have a good theoretical model. But I'm very curious of what could happen when I have everything in place and start correlating all the stuff during the actual the actual work with real use cases and understand and get which is the better output or outcome of the analysis.
Just to make sure, you're not talking about the naming of the risk. You're at the relationship between activities point, right?
Well, everything. For example, if I have a taxonomy of the risks, of the threats, and having a taxonomy of risks, I can, for example, give me all the tools related to this risk or to this threat, and check if the tools are the one I expected when I made that change in relation to the actual opportunity and the description of the risk.
Mm-hmm.
So once I do this, I can even, for example, start from general threat analysis that I've done outside the DevSecOps maturity model, and get all the impacts of that threat on the DevOps security model and on the prioritization, and then check if in base of the outcome, if the definition of the activity is giving the actual outcome that I expect, or
okay.
how to shape the activity in a way to maximize the outcome.
That means you would still keep this risk and have another mapping down, for example, down here, where the risk
Exactly.
is more clearly mapped to something.
Yes, and see what happens, and then I can ask the actual question. This formulation of risk is the way I express the risk useful in achieving the goal I had the first time I wrote it. It's an iterative process, but at first I think we need a way to correlate stuff and trial and error, and check different outputs, and together say, okay, if I shape it in this way, if I shape this activity in this way, I get this output. If I shape this activity in this other way, I get this output. Let's check which do we think is the better, and then touch and mess around as an approach. On the other side, I think we could improve every voice, clearly. But in the long run, I would find a methodology to improve the risk, the opportunity, and the fields that we are using. What do you think, folks?
There is another project called the Open Risk Universe or something like that, which I cannot remember the full name. I haven't worked with it myself, but I would suggest taking a look, or if anybody from the audience has, I think Dennis might also have some more knowledge than I do.
Yeah, there is a project like that. Yeah, as Andrea just pasted in the chat. It's about risk taxonomy, and it helps identify risk based on the source, event, and consequence. It's quite interesting. It's worth looking at if you follow the link that Andrea pasted.
This site here, right?
Yep.
And it got presented at the Open Security Summit.
Yes, it was, obviously.
do we see here somewhere is it factors we have to click on?
You click on
Sources?
where is it? There is I'm not sure if you're looking at in the right direction, but there is a if you go under how to use, I think, and go down, down. Yeah, this one is quite helpful. So you have like the sources, and then you have the events, and then you have the consequences. Based on that, you kind of identify your risk, because the risk is basically then a sum of the source, event, and consequence.
Have you used this in real life? Does it work very well?
I've used it in Glasgow, yeah. When we were doing our risk framework, I actually mentioned it on the session that I just that we just had before this one. Well, we kind of, I didn't take it straight on as a general rule, but it helps to identify the risk because it's quite objective. You have a source, an event, and a consequence, and you put that all together and it becomes a risk. But we kind of, for our purposes, we sometimes split it and we kind of make the actual consequences, we gave it levels of consequences, and therefore we gave it risk levels. But generally, I think it's quite practical to be used in this way. I think it's really it's an objective way to do it, and it's pretty straightforward.
Is there an API to map the risks? Petra, question for you, I think from Roberto in the chat.
I didn't
Go ahead.
see it.
Is there an API or a URI that we can use to map those risks to the DevSecOps maturity model?
No, not that I know of. No, not that I know of. But that sounds like a cool idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And what are the reds versus whites? Do you know?
Oh, good question. I can't really remember. I think,
High priority? No.
Possibly it could be, like if the ones that are being more flagged up, but I can't remember exactly, to be honest.
That's okay. That's great.
Just to get a feeling of your suggestion, could we try to map the example with the detection reduction of the attack surface to see how it feels? So we don't need to go through all, right? We just one activity to see how you recommend to implement it. Let me quickly open it. That is
By the way, this is done by Phil Huggins and Robin Altham. So if you want to know more, just generally after the session, you can feel free to reach out to them. Yeah. They're quite approachable and friendly too, and they're always happy if someone's interested to use this.
And they're both part of our community in our Slack. I was just checking if they're online, but unfortunately, no.
So I will try to put both on my screen so that we can see it together. This is not needed. So in DSOMM, everything right now is defined in YAMLs. So it's in text format. And so here we have the references. I think today there was a pull request to enhance this in a better way from Roberto, so that the references are a bit better. Let us use this version for now, and just to get a feeling. So it is called OISRU. And because I'm thinking, do we just add the sources, or do we add the sources, the events, and the consequences to this activity reduction of the attack surface?
And there could be multiple for each of the risks, correct?
Okay. So it is. So we have here under its sources, and then we map the sources, and then we have events with other events, and that is always we can always have multiple.
Yeah. But also, I mean, a risk in itself is kind of a sum of all the three. So if you're going to talk about multiple consequences, then it's kind of multiple risks in a way from this framework. So kind of if you're looking at reducing the attack surface by risk treatment, then this is a process in the risk treatment, because it's a process in risk management, because you're identifying the risk first and then you're treating it. That's just kind of my take on it.
Yeah. So non-compliance here is very hard to think to guess, right? Because it depends on your company. When you say you want to use containers and remove all unneeded or use only the components you needed, then you're non-compliance when you don't follow. But when you haven't defined it, it's or am I on the wrong track?
I would think non-compliance here relates more to certain companies have to oblige to certain compliance, so like PCI or like CIS benchmarks. I would think that's what non-compliance in this scenario is as a consequence, rather than non-compliance to your own standards. But that can be interpreted in that way as well. Like, yeah.
So what I have talked with the CISO of one company, he said, we only need to we need to have only the components we are needed, and then we came to the conclusion that distroless, so what is in the end reduction of the attack surface here, that is needed, and to comply with in this case insurance standards in Germany. So in case you don't follow for that company, it would be non-compliance, I would say.
Yeah, I guess for that certain company, yeah.
But in general, when I'm a shop which sells juices, then it might not enforce non-compliance.
Okay. You need to make it as generic as possible, but I think you better include more, and people can remove from their own risk analysis. I think that's a better way. So include as many as that makes sense.
So then we have non-compliance. So more is better than less when we follow that. And what else should we put here? Is there a recommendation?
There's many of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
The problem here is that this is actually about containers. So when an attacker is able to compromise a service, what he wants to do is go further in a cluster or in that environment. And that is a point, from my point of view, where it helps that there is a reduction of the attack surface, so that there are as less tools as possible to help him to break out of that container. Just to get you on board what we are talking about. Yeah, but in consequence, in case he is able to go further, we obviously have a damaged reputation.
We also have business disruption if they, if they manage to access a container, they can, make the, disrupt the microservices that are running on it.
Yeah.
And also you can have unplanned costs, because there might be additional costs to paying DevOps teams to go ahead and make a recovery of that container.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I added that as well. This is just to get a feeling, right? Is it worth it to include this? So we need to have an example, I feel. And in this case, we also have something else to compare it with, and then we can choose this is the best taxonomy.
Yeah.
Reputation. Okay. Do we also need the sources and the events?
Yeah. It's all kind of goes in a package.
In the package. So that means we also need an example for the source. So it is an external hacktivist. External hacktivist. So they are the worst, right? And then we might have others.
You can have a competitor that's gone rogue. You can have a state-sponsored. Also internal accidental, those are the interesting ones, because those are the ones that actually happen the most often, right? Like a lot of times it's your own internal team that's accidentally going to compromise you.
By the way, Petra, this type of capturing data in YAML is really powerful. And then if you find a way to then connect this to the, you can even use sometimes this to hold some information for the main graph. This is a graph, right? Think about it. Like, because then in our case, for example, if that name there actually matched the name of your sources, right? Then you could connect it to other things, right?
Yeah, that's true.
But it's very powerful, because then you can hold this information in your repos, so it can be closer to the apps, right? Sometimes it's a good place. I quite like YAML as a place to store graph data.
Yeah, that's true. And then events.
Fraud. I mean, now we have everything here, right?
Availability interruption. That's if you're talking about containers. That's an important one, probably.
Availability. I can't see it.
Availability interruption. It's I don't know. It's not in red.
But I can just availability
interruption. 7th from the bottom.
I see it. Okay. I will make it later look pretty in real English. Okay. And then we might have other events. And this would give us the ability, as Roberto mentioned, that we can later have a search for one. So for all activity we have the consequence, non-compliance, and we could list all of them. That would be that was one of the targets, right? And one option is to use this framework.
Mm-hmm.
All right. As we're in this topic right now, Roberto, do you have another taxonomy in mind?
Well, about risks, I was experimenting. Well, my colleagues are experimenting on NISA taxonomies. So with an approach which is very simpler that this one. So I will present you it after, and I think that we should find a way to model and to use references in different ways. For example, using URIs. In this way, I don't have to repeat or redefine the complete model, the complete risk model from whatever it comes, but I can use something that brings all the aspects and all the identification of a specific risk into the DSOMM.
So what? Just to make sure that I understood it correctly. So your wish is that you could have it like this.
I would have, for example, risk or threats or whatever field. Okay, so exactly. So dash, not a structured data like that, but just a line.
Mm-hmm.
For example, so now risks. Okay, I will write it. Dash NISA colon whatever uno NISA whatever two whatever.
Okay, so you mean that we write this here like this?
Yeah, but just as a string. Okay, exactly. And I will write specific plugins to resolve for each kind of dictionary of risks, the specific risk or risks.
Mm-hmm.
So when I go to,
but that is just a representation, right? That is just the representation. If we use it as a graph here, or if you put the graph in a string.
Yeah, the problem is that if I not the problem is that different risk models have different representations. There could be graph, there could be linear, there could be relational, whatever. I think that this kind of model should be independent of the taxonomy. Okay, but using something like URI, you can write plugins that resolve this kind of issues and visualize for human all the related information.
Mm-hmm.
So it will be simpler for us to add different kind of models and for people to integrate DSOMM with different kind of risk model or references. For example, currently there is this SOMM2 and ISO 27. They are top level. The part I'm working on is to have references. SOMM2 yeah, well, it's invented.
Oh, okay. So here are 2 slashes.
Well, that's not. It could be 2 slashes or it could be whatever. It just explicit that the interpretation of that string is delegated to an external vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the complex part is to write those vocabularies. For example, I'm currently working on this SEM2. The SEM repository has YAML files, and from this string that you wrote, you could, for example, with an API, get the file, get that YAML file on the SEM2 repository and render into the web app or in an application or whatever. And this could ease because the stuff, because the data set is quite small. It's so, for example, I dumped some activities. They are 90 or less than 100. It's perfectly easy to get this kind of reference and rendering an application.
Mm-hmm.
And this provides on our side the flexibility not to tie the DSOMM to a specific model of risk of references. And on the other side, it delegates to the application the complexity of creating more stuff and to help users to search and get data. But for example, if the OIS view will provide an API to navigate through the information, I could integrate this kind of information without even knowing the model, because linking, I will learn.
Okay.
But I don't know your opinion. Just let me know if this seems reasonable on your side.
I would say that it's for me, it's just a representation of how I represent it. You said it has more opportunities when you write it like a URL. So for me, it makes not so much difference to write it this way or this way. So in case you feel it has more potential, in case it's a URL, I don't see a problem. Maybe someone else sees a problem, but in case no one sees a problem, then that looks like a good opportunity for now.
It deals with repetition, saves you from typos. If you want to change the reference later, you can. Seems good.
I just thought we could even use JSON pointers. So instead of using a URI, you could reference an external YAML file, just like we do with the open APIs, where you reference schema outside. And something we are doing, for example, on an API for cross-border cooperation in the European Union, they are creating something, an engine that when you have to do cross-border interactions, they have a vocabulary of personal data fields that are translated from Italian to German schemas. and infrastructure take care of doing this kind of translation, in the long run, this could be something that we could have in DSOMM to reference external entities or taxonomies. In my opinion, it's quite complex, but we should find a way to be free to evolve, even in this direction, if we think it could be useful.
Yeah, but that's an outlook, right?
Yeah, it's a first step. I think we have a lot of work to do before.
Yeah, but it sounds like a plan. Andre in between had a question. I will read it out. What is the current rationale for the way risks are described in the framework? I was thinking that if they were stated as user stories, business analysts could use it right away. Risks. Okay, so we are talking here right now about the risk. So this one here, right? So it's so you're pointing out to abuse stories or evil user stories. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the way that I've, for my own, based on my own experience, when there's something really technical that business people need to grasp in order to make decisions, if that work is already done for them, then it's a matter of them copy pasting it and don't have to use a lot of brain power to try and comprehend the technical aspects of it. And I was wondering first, what was the rationale if there is already one that you guys are already using? So to better make suggestions, and if you actually had considered something like this as well.
So far, there is no defined way in how risks are described, but evil user stories, I also, in case I have time, I do use evil user stories also in threat modelings when there is a threat which needs to be documented, and I know this will make a lot of rounds between different people. Then I do write abuse stories. So
so the
yeah,
question,
I think it's a good introduction.
I was wondering if it would actually add, in your opinion, guys, more value to actually already have it there, because just to facilitate the communication with business. That would be it.
Yeah, it makes sense to have it. Would you see it as a replacement for the risk which is mentioned here, or would you see it as an addition?
The way that this one is structured, for example, which I was struggling with a bit, that I not needed, but I was lacking some understanding of what it was describing, in particular the part of the containers. I find that it would already be challenging. And me being technical, passing that responsibility later to somebody from business, that would make matters worse. Because if that would be the person responsible for creating an action, something like a JIRA ticket, where they actually have to describe what is the business reason behind it, then they would struggle. So if the business reason is already in the risk, then the job is done for them. And then, you could grab this as, this is mostly ready, and you just copy this from here. If you want to know more, you go and read inside of the framework what the risk is talking about, if that case is needed.
Just to make sure that so you say this here, when we use this, for example, this wouldn't be enough because it's too abstract. They really need a story behind.
You would, if you actually write a story, then this will actually become components of the story, I'm thinking.
Okay.
So
it would be like, as an evil competitor,
exactly.
or I do that and that. That would mean here we have at least 3, or would you say it's one user story with all of them? So as an evil competitor or state sponsored or internal.
It really depends on the amount of, well,
Okay.
that depends. But if you make it specific, a bit like when you're talking about smart objectives for business, right? So if it's very specific, then it's easy to treat. If you want to treat multiple things in one, saves time, sure. what I believe that we're pretty much doing in that particular risk one. We're assessing a lot of things that we don't consider, but we're still talking that it might, or we're still stating that it might be a risk.
Yeah. So I feel that the risk here is more for the technical people. So I would say maybe it's an extra field as an evil competitor and so on.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we could do that. So this is our example for today, which we use to as an example.
Yeah, I could see other projects in OWASP actually taking benefiting from this. If you already have that, then there's more mappings that actually can be done between projects. And it doesn't really matter who owns it, as long as we're actually talking all about the same thing. We can actually pull it and then later perhaps even create a project. And I don't know if this is in somebody else's head, where we actually keep all of the stories in the same location and then doing some sort of reference, like what Roberto was suggesting for the part of the references.
Cool. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Well, but that means just to show you the dimension of this succession. Right now we are having over 100 activities. That means 100 evil user stories in the worst case. In the best case, there are some which can be referenced, so you just need to write it once. But yeah,
I know, but that's actually the difficulty. And I know exactly what Dida just mentioned in the chat there, that Mario is going to talk about this. It's something that I was looking also for cornucopia, and I couldn't actually find an academic reference for it. That I struggled to figure out exactly where this came from. So I'm hoping to get even more highlights tomorrow. But the business value, however, I've already seen in practice, and something that I, for one, at least, believe that it's actually worth to have. So, hence mentioning that.
Okay. Yeah, my timer actually worked. Thank you for the reminder, Dida. Yeah. Roberto, do you want to show your prepared things, or have you already covered some of
we covered some part, but I will be brief because we already discussed some of the issues. So if I can share my screen.
We stop sharing.
Okay.
You can try. Cool.
Okay. So can you see it?
I can see things.
So one of the goals we had, and me and my colleagues, was to reorganize some parts of the activities to be able to associate better than with risks and implementation hints. So one of the parts that was done by a couple of colleagues was trying to start an identification of risk catalog. They made an example with the ENISA risk taxonomy, and on another perspective, we wanted to identify better the implementation tips or implementation hints catalog, because we wanted to know if when we adopt a product, which are the activities that are impacted by that product. And then the third party was related to the experimentation, that is the ability to search and correlate risks, activities, implementation hints, and references, so that we wanted to identify which are the best leverage to move when planning activities. For example, if I switch from this tool to this other tool, how will I improve the actual implementation of DSOMM? Or which are the differences if I pursue a SEM2 activity or an ISO action? So everything that can help us to guide in achieving and improving the maturity model. We wanted to do this retaining flexibility and the ability to change stuff because this model is very young, and on the other part, we want to take care of the basic idea of Timo that is very effective, that is very friendly with for developers to understand, and we think that even if this model is more close to a developer approach that to an QA folks approach, we want to retain this balance in favor of the developers, because DevSecOps is about developers, is moving left stuff, and we want to keep the engagement of the techie folks high. So here are some ideas. I started a worksheet. It's very rough. It's not detailed. And there is here the I will present the example that was made by a couple of colleagues. Start with the simple stuff. This is one activity. Can you see it, or is it too small?
I can see.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is an activity, security consulting or request. They made a map of this activity on this threat: lack of human resources competencies. This is just an example. There could be more threats, they say. The actual risk that we have in this activity is not asking for help is dangerous. And they mapped this kind of risk on 3 items that are tied to the ENISA risk model. So felt sense of security, system misconfiguration, information security risk not correctly addressed, and insecure code. There could be more. They just mapped the principles. And then
one
here,
question here. The threats is a 1 to n relationship to new risks, or how is that? So one threat has multiple of these risks. Did I understand that correctly? So there are sub bullets, let's say, of one thread, and that here are all together.
Those are taken from the ENISA taxonomy, but this part of risk is not exhaustive. And if you see the ENISA threat model is sometimes verbose, and you can find, for example, false sense of security in different threats. So they made an example of cherry picking, and then there is this part of the opportunity. If you apply this kind of example they tried to make this exercise. These are all the culture and organization dimension with different levels of the DSOMM. They map those parts to different threats. related to ENISA. This is one thread. Those are more threads. And on the other part, those are a set of risks. This is the actual specification. So it's a descriptive phrase. And on the other part, those risks are based on a taxonomy. And one of the goals of this approach is that once I create a relational schema, I could click, for example, on false sense of security and get all the actions of the DSOMM, all the implementations hints defined in the DSOMM. So I could starting well. So the DSOMM could be a pivot table, okay, a registry that could be used not only for assessing a specific platform, but the knowledge could be useful even on assessing, for example, which are the best tool to purchase related to risks, both in one direction and in the other. So this could provide something that is useful not only for a single project to improve the maturity model, but on the other side to drive purchase decision or budget for folks that are not directly involved in pushing for DSOMM on the DSOMM team. So I have 3 different teams that works on DSOMM in parallel ways, but I have a governance model that could help the company to survey which are the best tools to procure using a model that the company knows, for example, the ENISA model, but this could be even another model, okay? This is just an example because the ENISA model is quite easy to map because there is this Excel sheet where you can get the numbers of each risk, of each threat. So it's very easy to do this kind of activity for people that is practical with this kind of model, and they are just investigating. They are playing with this kind of stuff, and this could be another way to use the DevSecOps security model, not only to assess the maturity of a team, but to provide guidance and value to the company, to a central company or a central governance structure that has to improve the security, but has to make choices when they procure, for example, should I move to GitHub? I cannot procure GitHub just for, well, I can procure GitHub for one team, but if I have a company and I have 10 or 20 teams, I maybe want to know, is GitHub and the security features of GitHub good, a good value for money for all my teams? I don't want just Debian for GitHub, but I want something that could help me assess with a direct feedback from my teams. And this could be something interesting. But on the other side, for example, I have a central governance structure that wants to take all the insecure code. And so having the opportunity to get all the information related to insecure code without having to survey teams, but just with an application, it could be an interesting way. So to get and to bring to value all this information that we gather with these with our model, having something like that could be useful. Clearly, this kind of work can be done with different, and that should be done with different threat models, with different risk vocabularies, and we should find a model that can work with all this part. So this is, well, thanks to my colleagues, and they just joined the OWASP Slack space, and well, that's not my efforts. I'm just presenting their one, and on the other side, I'm working on more simple stuff. I created this simple spreadsheet from some YAML files. So zoom in. And I was trying to reference using the ID that some users into the application, into the DSOMM application. It's here, it's broken. I'm working on that, but well, you can see that, for example, the well, that's not the right. Okay, so you can see that SOMM and ISO stuff is in a sort of namespace dot reference, and with an API, when I go here, he understands that this is a reference to some tool, and makes a GET request on that vocabulary and shows me the stuff. And another interesting thing that we can do is with this kind of stuff, with this kind of mapping, is that since I have a reference that this kind of activity is related to the stream architecture design, or another stream is software requirements, I could even use this kind of mapping to make backward references. So I click on software requirements and get all the activities related to software requirements, even if I don't know if this identity is about software requirements. Or I could get information by function. So this identifier can be used to relate information and to create a more structured model where I could implement even heuristic or future stuff, because everything is based on data that could be correlated. For example, well, I could even use an Elasticsearch engine or a full text engine. Once I have everything in place, I click on architecture and I get all the information related to architecture or design, and get all information related to design. Or for more complex model, this could be even more useful. Or if I get even more models, everything in DSOMM, this could be, I could create some even more interesting model that uses DSOMM as a pivot table for correlating different security model, different risk model, different implementation stuff, implementation products.
Mm-hmm.
So having a consistent schema for data, I think could provide more benefits and could provide us with more ideas. Well, this is another. Well, this is DSOMM. I made it in a schema, so I could have ISO references here. And well, what I was trying to do was to join this with some streams so that I could get converging parts and get all the activities related to a specific some part. For example, it could be governance, it could be operation. So here I started to deduplicate implementation ints. An interesting thing that we can do on implementation ints, for example, here I have CI/CD tools, for example, Jenkins, or here I have curl and OpenAPI. An interesting outcome of the duplicating is could be, for example, having a dictionary of different tools for different programming languages. So if I have curl, probably I could have JMeter, I could have other tools that are similar to curl. Okay, some tools can cover more actions, other tools are very atomic. For example, if I use the superlinter of GitHub, I could cover 10 actions with just one tool. And this is the kind of analysis that could help people that put measures, that have to implement measure to assess the procurement of tools. Because, well, I can know that this tool provides or covers 10 activities. This tool covers 2, but this tool is cheaper. Well, this information should be on another place. But I think that putting our and think about how to organize information in a way that is easily searchable. It is structured, but not much structured, so that it can be evolved. It's something we should focus in some way or in another. Well,
Roberto, if I can interrupt you there just for a question. So if I'm understanding this correctly, you're offering threat modeling against particular versions of software, right? So on my question already, I'm focusing on the particular versioning things. Yes, curl, you can use it for multiple things, and you can use some of the tools available for GitHub, as you mentioned. But then I'm just considering the amount of work of what you're proposing, because the software will evolve. They will have fragilities. Then you'll have to check if those fragilities are gone or not. You'll have to keep track of the security advices, and then you'll have to write up the threat modeling itself against each version. Which it is open source tools. It would be great to have, but the amount of work it seems to be very daunting. If I did misunderstand what you were saying, however, the questions that you were raising or aiming to actually have to make those assessments easy, I found that extremely interesting, and I would like to know more. But I have to go through and read it, I believe.
Well, I think that there are different ways of achieving this goal. I do not expect that in a general DSOMM, I will provide all the possible implementation tools or softwares. I think that once we have the schema in place, everyone could customize his software choices and his software implementation vocabulary to fit something. I think that there are a lot of software catalogs that I could use to achieve this. For example, there is this stack share. Probably, well, you know it. So this is we have a lot of softwares with their taxonomies. They are described from single software to stack for.
Interesting, but I was not familiar with this now, so I will become familiar with it.
Okay, for the cloud stuff, I have landscape of cloud native foundation. I could use those APIs for taxonomies and for softwares. So instead, and for example, we could provide in our DSOMM stuff, for example, linters, and then with an API having from linters, getting all the linters that we have for the cloud world, or for StackShare, or for GitHub, for example. I think that when I have a small set of choices, just like threats, just like risks, we can create or use our vocabulary. When we mess with products, we can define progressively a taxonomy of tools. Probably it already exists because GitHub or other code sharing tools provide that. Or we could adopt a taxonomy already present on StackShare or some other catalogs, software catalogs. And then we could provide, I mean, in the long run, and it's not today, those are ideas, a tool that that you could integrate into the DSOMM application. So you could click, for example, on customize actions. You click on linters, and it shows you a set of tools retrieved from StackShare of Cloud Native Foundation. You select the one you're interested in, and then you profile your DSOMM for your company. Or you can get this taxonomy from another API, an API that you made yourself for your company, or from your CRM tool. I mean, I think API can help to scale up and customize this tool.
I understand. Thank you for elaborating there. I do understand the value.
But it's not for tomorrow. I think at first we should focus on some steps. We could check the output, iterate. For example, for the ENISA stuff, my colleagues did it for one dimension. We could doing this for other dimension scales linearly, so everybody could take one other dimension and try to map this on ENISA or to other models. So this scales linearly. If we are 10, we can speed works. I think that my colleagues want to discuss this further with you. I don't know if they managed to join the call because they have kids and it's 9 o'clock p.m. in Italy. But I think that discussing this kind of stuff, once we have a clear data model, we can work in parallel on this with interested people, and everybody can contribute his own part. One for threats, one for mapping to measures, one for mapping to software.
Sounds good. I actually I need to grab this and go through it because I am doing some assessments of tools, and in particular a linter, which I actually enjoyed hearing you talking about. I wouldn't mind actually to share that and get different views of the analysis that I'm actually making. And so I'll have to grab this document and see how to best apply. Might reach out.
Well, do you everybody have the link?
I actually took a screenshot, but if you could share it, that would be, yeah, I could.
Well, those are the slides.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And on the slides, you get you can comment the. Oh, well, if you cannot get the slides, it's because Microsoft, okay, this is the, because Microsoft uses different links. So I will try to give you the correct one. This is the correct link to the slides.
Now I opened it. Okay. I got the risk taxonomy. Yeah.
And I think that we are happy to discuss it on the OWASP Slack, on the DSOMM channel.
Yeah, there will be some challenge. I'll hit
it. In the OWASP Slack. And Andre, are you on OWASP Slack or?
I am on the OWASP Slack.
Okay.
Normally don't have the time to go through it, but I'll have a look.
I just posted the link.
You there as well? Because I can.
I stalked you there.
Mhm.
The colleagues I tagged, Laura and Salvatore, are the ones that provided the table.
DSOMM. Okay, I'm there.
So they are the right folks for that. But you can talk to me for engaging, because they are quite. They always work on. They are not very slacky, because they work with at a business level. So they work with QA stuff, compliance, and so on. So they may not be all day on Slack. Try to reach them. If you can't, just drop me a line.
As soon as I have the chance, I'll go through it, and then I'll drop you a line there. Thank you for that.
Oh, sure. I mean, it's not tomorrow. We are not in a hurry, and there is a lot of work to do, but we need, I think, to preserve the value of what Timo did, and we should change things slowly, and when there is a positive feedback, to avoid making things too complex.
Thank you.
Well, I speak a lot. Sorry.
That's how things work. If you don't, ask, you don't get, right?
Well, did I in next meetings, please stop me when I speak too much?
No, I won't. All right. Are we happy to wrap up? And we can set another one. So people will work offline, but I think we should keep the momentum going and set up some sessions for the next month as well, so we can continue the discussion. And we'll take it from there. Is that cool?
Okay.
All right then. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to Timo for creating this very, very cool model, and that has really a lot of possibilities, in my opinion.
Thank you.